Let's look at the fourth video on complex numbers, adding, subtracting, and multiplying complex numbers. So the key rule when you're doing algebra with complex numbers, algebra with I, is that you treat I as if it was a variable. It's not a variable, but you treat I as a variable. That's the first step. And then always simplify I to a power other than 1. If you always do that, then algebra with complex numbers will be easier and never harder than algebra with real numbers. First, what we're going to do in this video is first we're going to add and subtract complex numbers, and then we're going to multiply them. So let's look at our first example. Let's do 2 plus 7i plus 4 minus 16i. So there we have 2 plus 7i plus 4 minus 16i. Since there's not a number or a negative in front of this parentheses, we can clear the parentheses. Now we combine like terms. 2 and 4 are like, so that would be 6. 7 minus 16. 7i and minus 16i is going to be a minus 9i. And if you think about the rule, the key rule is this would be exactly the same as 2 plus 7x plus 4 minus 16x, which would be 6 minus 9x. We treat I as a variable even though it's not one. Let's look at another example, a subtraction problem. Let's do 3 minus 10i minus 12 minus 5i. The first thing you need to do in this problem is you have a negative outside the parentheses, so you need to distribute that negative. You have 3 minus 10i minus 12 plus 5i. It's a plus 5i because when you distribute the negative, a negative times the negative is a positive. Now you combine like terms. That 3 minus 12 is going to be minus 9. And minus 5i plus 5i is a minus 5i. And that's adding and subtracting complex numbers. Now when you multiply complex numbers, in the simplest case we would have something like negative 10i times 4i. If these were x's, that would be minus 40x squared. Since we're going to treat I as if it's a variable, then that's going to be minus 40i squared. The difference is when you have I to a power other than 1, you always simplify it. I squared is simply minus 1. So you're going to have minus 40 times minus 1. In this case, that's going to be a positive 40. Another example along those lines might be minus 7i times 3. If these were x's, it would be minus 7x times 3 would just be simply minus 21x. And in minus 7i times 3, it'll be exactly the same, minus 21i. So even though I is not a variable for purpose of algebra, you can treat it as if it's a variable. Now let's do some slightly more difficult multiplication problems. Let's do 2i times 3 minus 8i. In this case, we're going to distribute. We distribute the 2i across the parentheses. 2i times 3 is going to be 6i. And 2i times a minus 8i, that'll be a minus 16i squared. So the first step is treat the I as if it's a variable. And then the second step is whenever you see I to a power other than 1, always simplify it. That's 6i minus 16 times minus 1. You have a multiplication, and minus 16 times a minus 1 is going to be a positive 16. So you have 6i plus 16. However, we're always going to write it in standard form. And what standard form is for a complex number is essentially just write the real part first. It's always a plus bi. So in this case, write the real part first, positive 16 plus 6i. We can do another problem. Negative 2i times 3 plus 7i. We're going to distribute. That's a minus 6i minus 14i squared. The I squared becomes a minus 1, so that's minus 6i minus 14 times minus 1. Minus 6i plus 14. Write it in standard form. Write the real part first. 14 minus 6i. And that's going to be your answer.